Okay, hello everybody. I'm Jim Hendricks, your host for today's presentation. I'm with Hendricks Wealth and Estate Management, the owner of Hendricks Wealth and Estate Management. And today we have a long-awaited presentation for you. This was a presentation that was originally scheduled back in April, but our guest presenter had a family emergency that needed to be tended to, but he's back with us here today and going to be presenting Medicare 101. And that is Joshua O'Brien with the O'Brien Benefits Group, with Joshua O'Brien Benefits Group. I'll let him introduce himself once we get to him. This is part of our weekly series of webinars and seminars that we do that hopefully give you some tips, pointers, and information that you can use in your own financial lives. And we're really excited to have Joshua here today. This has been one of our more anticipated presentations that we've had in this entire series. We've been doing this series since September now, so we've got quite a few under our belt. And again, this is one of the ones that has been most requested and most eagerly anticipated among our invitees to these webinars. So Joshua, we're glad to have you here, and we really look forward to getting rolling. And I'm just going to get rolling right into our slides here, and I'll let you take it over. But just to really quick give a little bit more of an intro, I, again, am the owner of Hendricks Wealth and Estate Management. Our firm was founded in 2004. We do business as Hendricks Wealth and Estate Management. The legal name of our firm is J.J. Hendricks Financial Services. We have offices in Algonquin, Illinois, and Bradenton, Florida, which is close to where Joshua is, in Bradenton, Florida. We currently have 5 advisors and 2 support staff. And our goal is to be your lifetime financial advisor and help you with all aspects of your financial life. And that includes giving you information about things like Medicare. And again, we're really happy to have Joshua here as our guest speaker today. So Joshua, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim, for the wonderful introduction. Just big thanks for your whole team for allowing me to be here and obviously giving just a big support with putting all of this together. I really do appreciate you and your team. You folks have been fantastic and lovely hosts, and I am really looking forward to educating everybody that has been able to attend this webinar, podcast, and live stream here. Ultimately, just getting down to the basics as to like who I am as a person real quick, and then we'll jump right into it. So my name is Joshua O'Brien. I am the founder and owner of Joshua O'Brien Benefits Group, LLC. And I have about 5 years experience working within the health insurance industry. And we do a whole array of different products from people who are under age 65, independent family, and individuals all the way up to retirement. So people who are in Medicare, we love to help people who are going through these transitions in life. And our goal is to be a consistency for those people. And that's really the core of what we do. And me being an independent agent, I'm not beholden to any particular product or carrier. So as the industry does change, we like to be that, like I said before, a consistency for you and a constant. So that way you are in the know. And in an ever-changing industry, we want to be there for you. Yeah, we'll go ahead and jump right into the wonderful mystery of Medicare, and we'll start with the basics.
Okay, and before I go to the next slide, I'll just say a couple quick housekeeping things. You'll notice down at the bottom of your screen, you have chat and Q&A. If you have questions for us, we will have time for questions and answers at the end, but if you have a question as we're going, you can post your question to that Q&A tab and type your question in, and we'll address those, again, probably at the end of the presentation, or if you have something you'd like to mention in the chat, you can do that too, and we'll be handling those again at the very end of the presentation. So Joshua, back to you.
Perfect. Fantastic. So today, the big topic is, of course, aging into Medicare. That is a big, huge mystery. A lot of people aren't educated in the realm of Medicare, how it works. It is a very different system from what a lot of people are acquainted with when it comes to employer group coverage or individual coverage before you enter into Medicare. And so our hopes and dreams is to eliminate a lot of those questions that you may have and confusion. So typically when people are entering into Medicare, it normally happens right around age 65. So that is called your initial enrollment period, and it typically gives you about a 7-month period in order to be able to make your selections. So you have your 3 months prior to your birthday month of turning age 65, you have your birthday month, and then you have 3 months after to make a decision as to what type of products you want, what kind of coverage you want to get settled into with the Medicare industry. And this is going to be the one-time deal as to when you can actually get a guaranteed issue. Okay, so what does guaranteed issue mean for a lot of people is that it just means that you don't have to go through any underwriting. It's guaranteed for you. You don't have to worry about them coming back with any kind of questions that might hinder you from getting certain coverage. So this is the time for you to really take advantage of this issue. Okay. Now, one thing I do want to mention real quick is that this is one of the major, more common ways to be able to enter into Medicare. However, there are disability benefits that if you're receiving Social Security disability income for 24 months, that will actually grandfather you into Medicare. If you have ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease, that can also grandfather you in as well. If you have end-stage renal disease, that is something that would, for like kidney failure and so on and so forth, that allows you to be grandfathered into Medicare, even prior to age 65. And then there's also disability benefits for federal state employees as well. So there's typically a 29-month waiting period that's involved with that. But if any of those ring a bell for anybody here, we would love to answer any additional questions that are pertaining to that. But those are other ways that you can grandfather into Medicare. But we'll stick with the more common one and popular one, which is aging into Medicare at age 65. So we'll go ahead and start with the basics, which is what is original Medicare? Original Medicare consists of what is called Part A, which is all things hospital related, so hospital coverage. And then there's also Part B, which is everything that is medical, or what we like to call day-to-day. So all things medical, day-to-day, anything taking place within a 24-hour period. Okay, so that could be your blood work, that could be a procedure, that could be a surgery, that could be going to the doctor and getting an x-ray done. It could be anything from small to big, common to uncommon. That all takes place within that 24-hour period. That falls under your Part B. So your initial inpatient hospitalization out-of-pocket costs typically range from a whole wider range of different things. When you're actually going to the hospital for the first time, having your Part A, okay, which is hospital coverage, you will run into what is a per occurrence deductible of $1,736, okay? And what I mean by per occurrence is every 60 days. So if you were hospitalized, say like January, you would go ahead and pay this deductible for your hospital stay. And then if you're hospitalized again, say like, February, well, you wouldn't have to pay it again. But if you were hospitalized again in July, that can actually add up throughout the year in expenses, right? Especially if you're having to be hospitalized quite frequently. So that is a big major expense that we want to avoid if we possibly can. Now for the costs, typically Part A, it ranges in the cost based upon how many quarters you've worked. Okay, so if you've worked less than 30 quarters your whole life, this is also including both you and your wife or your spouse, husband. It's typically going to be $565 per month if you've worked less in the United States and paid into Medicare less than 30 quarters. If you've worked between 30 to 39 quarters, it's going to be $311 per month. And then if you've worked 40 quarters or more, it's going to be $0 per month. All right. So it's a big major key. A lot of people are worried about whether or not they have to pay for Part A. But no, a lot of times if you've worked for a number of years, you're A-okay. Okay. So Part B, medical, let's go ahead and jump into that. The base pay is $202.90 per month. Okay. Now this number does fluctuate from year to year. Last year it was below 200. This year it did go up. So this is also a great factor that you need to have when you're budgeting for your retirement, is that $202 isn't always going to be that amount of money every single year. It could fluctuate. Okay. So you need to be financially prepared for that. It is based on what is called an income-related monthly adjusted amount, which is called IRMA. You may have heard that in passing. This is based upon the last 2 years of your tax returns. Okay. This is a chart directly from Social Security. You can go on to socialsecurityadministration.gov and you can find this sheet. This is, like I said, based upon the past 2 years of your tax return. So this year is from 2024. So if you're entering into Medicare or becoming eligible for Medicare, it's going to be based upon your 2024 tax return. And this gives you a good idea as to how much you would be spending for this year. Now, this list does change from year to year as well, and they come out with a new one. So 2025 for your tax return coming out next year, that's going to change things based upon that year. But this is another great factor, a good point as to you need to financially prepare yourself for these things. All right, and we're going to go ahead and get into the specifics as to when you would go use your Part B or your day-to-day. It has an annual deductible of $283 per year. Now, this does change from year to year as well, the deductible. So that's something to keep in mind. One important factor about this that a lot of people don't realize is that it's not going to be a 0% cost once you clear that deductible for every year. It's going to revert to a 20% coinsurance that's uncapped. So remember when I said that it's a day-to-day? I mean, if you go into a doctor's office and say like under Medicare, you've already paid your deductible for the year and you go into a doctor's office and it's $100 for that visit. Well, 20% of $100 is really not a whole lot. You're looking at $20 for that visit. That's not bad at all. But keep in mind what is also covered under Part B. You have chemo, you have surgeries, you have all of these major expensive procedures potentially that you could be faced with, and paying 20% of say like a $10,000 bill, that's a lot for somebody. So our goal is to protect you from those high expenses when you're in Medicare. All right, so we covered the basics, the foundation of what Part A and Part B are. And a couple of things that we did not cover, which we're missing that are pretty big, and one has to be what is called your prescription drug costs, right? So that's what we're going to go into here. So what I want to do is that there are two different directions that you can go when you enter into Medicare that I want to ensure that you understand is that you can go to two different directions, okay? So picture that you're driving down the road and you come to a fork in the road. You can go to the right or to the left. And we're going to pretend that we're going to go to the right here, okay? Now, the right side is going to be the most open network known to mankind, okay? Which is original Medicare's network, all right? So you can call up a doctor completely across the United States from where you live. And you could ask them the simple question, hey, do you accept Medicare? And if they say yes, you are in network, which is amazing. It's the most strongest network known to mankind, okay? And that would be on this right side. So one thing that we are missing is that prescription drug cost. Now, in order to enroll into what is called Part D, prescription drug plans, you can only do that through carriers. Now, each carrier, their premiums varies based upon where they are offered in your zip code, all right? Each and every single year, Medicare actually dictates how much of a deductible these carriers can have. What is the cap? This year's cap for these products is $615 for them to offer a policy with a deductible. Now, a lot of different policies, it's different for each one, okay? Some have a $0 deductible, some have a $300 deductible. It varies. And with that variance, it also changes the cost of the premium as well. Okay, and so there's many different carriers to choose from. Our goal as agents is to go through that, is to be able to collect all of your medications and find what would be the right fit for you. Okay, so that's where we come in. And like I said, not all carriers are the same. One thing that we also want to try to cover is with the supplements that you see here, the supplement Medigap policies. Those are designed to cover those really high expenses for your Part A and Part B. Remember, I mentioned the really high deductible under Part A for the hospitalization, that big number, $1,700 per occurrence. These supplements will protect you from that, okay? Remember that I mentioned the uncapped 80/20 coinsurance, the 20% coinsurance for when you have to go get a procedure or something that could be really expensive. That's what these will cover as well. So having a Medicare supplement or a Medigap, which is a fancy dancy term for covering those gaps, okay, is designed to protect from those high costs from original Medicare. All right. So we've covered the basics when it comes to original Medicare. And the big advantage, like I said, is that you're in that big, huge network. Now, you can also go to the left, which is called Part C or Medicare Advantage. A lot of you may have seen a lot of the commercials out there that have to do with Medicare Advantage, all these different carriers. Now, these are offered through the different carriers, and it is designed to provide coverage for your Part A, Part B, and Part D all simultaneously. Now, for those who are very familiar with like their employer group coverage or something offered through their marketplace or anything like that, you're probably familiar with a lot of the traditional setups such as PPOs, HMOs, HMO POSs. That's what these plans are designed for. Now, keep in mind that these policies do sound very, very attractive. They come with additional benefits such as like vision, dental, hearing, over-the-counter benefits. You have with your traditional coverage, you have max out-of-pocket, co-pays, co-insurance. One thing to keep in mind is that they do typically offer $0 premium, but it is important to know that once you have gone into this, you are confined within a carrier's network. So if it's an HMO PPO, it's based upon their negotiations and contracts with all of these different clinics, hospitals, and so on and so forth as to whether or not you will have the coverage with their product, okay? Even though it's a $0 cost versus having to pay for a premium for a supplemental or for your prescription drug supplemental, you're saving money on that end. However, you could potentially be paying it once you go use it. So I like to summarize it for everybody saying that you're paying for it now if you were to go with a supplemental in original Medicare, like a Medigap policy or a Part D prescription drug plan. You're paying for it now because you're paying the premiums for it. On the Medicare Advantage side of things, you're not paying for it now. You're paying a $0 monthly premium in a lot of cases. Sometimes there is a small premium that comes with it. However, you pay for it later when you go to use it. You're paying for it when you go to the hospital because there's high co-pays, co-insurances, there's out-of-network costs involved as well. And sometimes you may not get approval for certain things. However, not everybody may be able to afford the premiums that come with Medigap policies or prescription drug policies. So our goal is to meet your budget and find the strongest policy that's available to you. It is important, as you can tell here, you've probably already realized it. Once you go over into Medicare Advantage, you have 12 months to make a decision as to whether or not this is working out for you to go back to original Medicare, okay? Otherwise, after that 12 months, you are now confined to the Medicare Advantage system, all right? Now, outside of your initial enrollment period, if you were to leave your Medicare supplement policy or Medigap policy and you were to try to get back into it, you very well could be on the hook for going through intensive underwriting. So if you are first introduced to Medicare, take advantage, take time to really think of your options so that you're making a good, wise decision. Now, this is the grid showing for the Medigap policies, okay? So you can see that there are varying different coverages here. You can see some have like a 50% coinsurance. Ultimately, Plan G and Plan N are going to be the most effective policies that are on the market currently. You can see where it checks off all of the boxes right there in terms of the amount of coverage there. You can see in the far right corner, there are these different policies, Plan C and Plan F. Those have actually discontinued for people who have entered into Medicare past 2020. So if you happen to be somebody that wants to get into the Medicare system and you were initially eligible back in 2020 or before that, well, then you're eligible for that kind of policy. The stronger policies that are out there currently is Plan G and Plan N. And like I said, they vary in different premium costs. So there are certain different policies out there like the K, the M, and all of those are a lot cheaper, obviously or more affordable potentially, because of the amount of costs they cover. Okay. So Plan G and Plan N would be a very strong policy and a good selection for anybody out there who are shopping. Again, thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I will go ahead and conclude this presentation on my end, and we will open it up to any questions that somebody might have.
Okay, thanks, Josh. If you have questions, then now is a good time to put them into the Q&A portion down on the bottom of your screen. While we're waiting for some questions to come in, I'll quickly mention that we've got Jim Madel on the docket for next week, talking about your old 401k and how it could be costing you more than you think. Again, this is a weekly series that we conduct here of seminars and webinars, and it's every Wednesday at 11:30 Central, 12:30 Eastern, to try to get you during your lunchtime if you have time for a quick little presentation or an educational session to try to keep your finances in order. We're happy to try to accommodate that. And again, we do this every week. And then copies of this will be posted on our website. We also have a YouTube channel. You can visit our website at hendrickswealth.com. It's just over my shoulder here. I will stop sharing my screen so that you can see us, all of us in this meeting here. Josh, just a couple of questions. What percentage of people do you find that end up on Medicare Advantage policies versus just your typical Medigap policies?
Oh, it varies. It varies a lot. One thing that I always advise people on is that because you can't really tell somebody's budget how well they've actually prepared for, the Medicare costs. In a lot of cases, I find that they're reactive. They're coming into it and they're like, "Oh, I did not realize that it's actually going to be that expensive to keep, Medicare up and active." And then they fall into more of having to go with only Medicare Advantage. And for me, I feel like that, wow, if they were educated and were financially prepared for this moment a bit more, they would have had more of an option. Now, for somebody that can afford the original Medicare supplement side of things, that big open network that we mentioned earlier, what I always tell them is that gives you actually more options. That puts you in a great position to be able to make more decisions. So if it becomes too expensive for you, you can always go over to Medicare Advantage if you so choose, because those are guaranteed issue all the time. You don't have to go through any underwriting for them. So it's nice to have that as kind of like a backup plan, if you will. But to be completely honest, it's a huge mix. I have people who go into original Medicare supplements and then they say, "This is not for me. I can't afford this. I want to go over to a Medicare Advantage," and vice versa. So,
Okay, and we've got a question. I'll paraphrase a little bit here, but we've got somebody who says they have some various health issues that may need doctors anywhere.
mm.
Would Part G be best? And also, how do the policies come into play if you're abroad and need care?
So ultimately, in order to, so if you're abroad, ultimately you do have some coverage costs that are involved with Medicare. And that is definitely a great follow-up conversation that I would love to have with that individual as to the specifics of how much Medicare will cover you when you're abroad. However, when you are abroad, it is good to try to keep things active here with Medicare and try to use, so say like if you're over in Europe, they have their own national health insurance coverage that's there, right? You can take advantage of that. There's also travel insurance that is involved too. But if you're wanting to have something that's planned abroad, like a planned procedure, you most certainly want to use whatever that country's health insurance system is if they have something in place. If they don't, it would not be advised to be able to use travel insurance for that, because travel insurance is more for like if something was to happen to you that you're reactive to, right? And you want to make sure that anything is planned here. Now, Plan G would be a very, very great plan for somebody who is going to be using it a lot. Okay, if you're going to be using it a lot, you can do the math and find that you're going to be saving a lot of money if you were to go with a supplemental. So I would definitely go with a supplemental Plan G or N or vice versa. So
She followed up here and said they'd be going abroad. I think implying that they'd be abroad for 90 days or less. So,
okay, yeah. Yeah, so if you're not looking at getting any kind of medical coverage whatsoever and you're only gone for 90 days, then I would most certainly get travel insurance that will protect you for especially when you're traveling in between countries and so on and so forth. That way, if something was catastrophic was to happen to you, you have that, and then you have the Medicare coverage as like a secondary, if that makes sense.
Okay, and maybe a follow-up to that. So G and N have no network requirements at all.
They do, but only for a select few, like a very small percentage. So there are some clinics out there, that small clinic groups that do not accept Medicare at like Medicare at all, original Medicare, but they will only accept like Medicare Advantage and so on and so forth. Really, the best way to do it would be to call each and every single one of the specialist providers that you know and ask them the simple question, "Hey, do you accept original Medicare?" Okay. You don't want to
Correct.
give them
And
a carrier name because they might, in their head, they might think that that is a carrier like Medicare Advantage, and then they're going to say no, or they're going to say yes, and they'll just be confused. So you want to ask the question, do you accept original Medicare?
okay, and this could be subject to IRMA potentially. So let's assume without IRMA adjustments, in other words, there'd be no income-related adjustments to your Medicare premiums. The question is, what's the most that a total package could cost altogether? So let's say Part N plus Medicare plus D would cost altogether, assuming no IRMA.
That is a very, very, very good question. Now, it has to do with region too, okay? Because when you're a lot of these carriers, when they're offering, or I should say, hosting these supplemental policies like Plan N and Plan G, it is going to be based upon your zip code, okay? The same thing with the selection when it comes to your prescription drug policy, Plan D, okay? So those are typical things that we would want to make sure that we're customizing the quote for you, taking in the information of your particular situation where you live, the amount of prescriptions that you take, and which carrier would actually make sense in terms of like a Plan G as well. Because if you want a carrier that has good ratings and good quality customer service, we're able to advise on that as well.
Okay. And then maybe a question for you. Do you sell travel insurance?
I do sell travel insurance. Yes, I do. In fact, if you go to my website, joshuaobrienbenefitsgroup.com, you will find that I have a page that is built into my website that is for travel. And you can click on a little logo that's a compass, and you're able to quote yourself, or I'd be happy to set up an appointment and quote something for you.
Okay. And what states are you licensed in?
Oh, I'm licensed in a lot of states. I am licensed in Illinois, so that is something that I would be happy to discuss with any products that are in the area. Yes, I would be happy to check and see. For us agents, it doesn't take a whole lot for us to add a license on that we may not be licensed in, or even to take one off if we don't have a lot of clients in that state, right? So for me to be able to help people, like my goal here is to help everybody. So.
Okay. Very good. Excellent. And this presentation was marketed most heavily in Florida and Illinois. So I believe that's where most of our attendees are. But it could have gone, we could have people all over the country in this particular presentation and people watching after the fact too. So, and then a question here before we wrap it up. What's the difference between Part G and Part N? And I can maybe start sharing my screen again with
Yeah, sure.
your chart. And
Yeah, that
that
would
might.
be great, because I can really speak into that for sure. So you have your Plan G and Plan N that it shows right here. Now, you will notice that there is a slight difference between Plan G and Plan N. If you look at Plan N, it says right there in that second bracket, copays apply. Now, the copays that would apply for your Plan N typically have to do with all things like in terms of like if you go to a doctor or specialist to visit them, you are now paying a $20 copay for those visits every single time. And if you are sent to the emergency room, you are paying a $50 copay. Okay. So that's the big major difference when it comes to Plan G and Plan N. Ultimately, again, you need to sit down knowing your situation, how much finances you're willing to dish out. So if you went to see a specialist, numerous doctors, say like 20 times a month, you're losing money, because if you went with a G, it would have made sense financially to go with G because it's completely paid for. The only thing that you are responsible when it comes to these supplements is only paying the annual deductible, okay, for your Part B. Okay, that's medical. So remember, I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation that there is an annual deductible. So you pay the annual deductible first, and then you start paying. Then the supplement takes care of everything else. Okay. Now, if you have the plan N, you pay for your deductible plus whatever the copay is. Okay. And once you've cleared that deductible, then you're only in charge of having to pay the $20 or the $50. Okay.
Okay, very good. And let's see, I'm going to take a look and see if we've got any further questions that have popped up. So one last question here, and then we'll wrap it up. Somebody's chosen an Aetna plan, and those prices have gone up significantly. Can they change?
Yes, you can change. It can be hard to change in some cases. So if they have like an Aetna supplemental plan G, plan N, something to that extent, and they have some underlying health conditions, it can be very hard to move from that to another supplemental because you have to go through intensive underwriting. And if you say yes to any kind of question, you're on the hook for potential, getting declined from having that policy. So ultimately, like I said, we just take in your information. We make sure that we get a good insight as to whether or not you would qualify for something like that. And based upon your situation, if it looks like that you would qualify, we would love to help you out.
Okay, well, we try to keep these to about a half an hour. We're not subject to a hard time limit per se, but we've gone just a little bit over our half hour today. Lots of good questions, lots of great interaction today. Joshua, very, very, very informative. Again, I think this is one of our most anticipated sessions that we've had, and certainly appreciate you jumping on. We do generally get a lot of people not only watching live, but watching after the fact as we post this on our various different outlets, including Facebook and YouTube and so on and so forth, and our website. So as we get further questions in, you see Joshua's contact information right on your screen, or if we get follow-up questions in our office, we'll be happy to forward them along. Again, thanks, Joshua, for being here. Again, I think it was a great half hour. Again, I'm Jim Hendricks, Hendricks Wealth and Estate Management, and we look forward to seeing you next week on our next presentation featuring Jim Madel. Okay, thanks, everybody.